on page 92. So the Kuzari was telling us, Rabbi Yonatan Halevy was telling us, that sure, there may be things in other religions that are spiritual, but just because they're spiritual doesn't mean that they're true. I think it's actually a good topic to this. We're going to finish with this. He said it's like the fool who enters the doctor's office and starts giving out prescriptions. 90% of the people he's going to kill. Just because 10% of the people will be healed, because statistically that's the amount of people that he's going to, by accident, give the right medication to, doesn't mean that it's true. So even if you were to prove to me that there are people in other religions that could reach very holy places, maybe, I don't know if it's true or not, it wouldn't make their religion true. Judaism doesn't take away from other religions the ability to be good, to accomplish good things. What it says is you're like a fool who's in a doctor's office. When you reject the Torah, the blueprint of the world, you're essentially saying, okay, I want to use the world, but I'm not reading the user's manual. I'll give you a great example. I was once in Baltimore at a date. Shidduch date. Not a date factory, not this kind. A real date. And I rented a car. It was the first time I had to rent a car, and it was a whole new experience for me. And I was driving, and the whole time I was driving this girl to the coffee store, back from the car was making noise. Terrible noise. Like, I can't tell you, almost like I was driving a race car or driving a train. Like, it wasn't a car noise. And I figured, I just rented a car, brand new car. What's going on here? 3 days I'm driving this car. 3 days. I'm driving, noise, shemishmo. And I'm checking, and I called the company, everything's okay with the car. I brought it in, fine. It turns out there was a car that when you put it in drive, if it goes into drive and it moves left, it drives off automatic and onto manual.
Oh my gosh, and you needed to...
But I don't know how to drive a stick shift car. So, but it's an automatic car. I rented an automatic car. But when you put it in drive, if you don't keep it on the right side, it switches to the left side and goes to manual.
Oh my gosh.
And the whole time I'm driving, and the gears, I don't know what they're doing. But I was convinced that something is okay with the car. Why? Because sometimes when I'm driving, it doesn't make noise. Sometimes it's okay.
I learned on a stick shift.
Yeah, you learn on a stick shift. Right. So, I mean, I learned on a car, when I learned to drive, it was automatic, but it didn't have power steering. It actually turned the car when you turned the wheel. Yeah, sure. The Volkswagen van that we drive. When it comes to religion, you have the same thing. People, so sometimes it works for them. Yeah, but it's because you're driving on manual and you don't want to. Either you can learn how to drive, or you can just put it into automatic. Either you can learn the Torah and follow the rules of the Torah, or you can say, listen, I'm stepping out of the game, I'm letting the Jewish people do whatever they need to do to make this world a spiritual place. You have two choices. It's the people, they go to, I don't know, all kinds of Far East places, and they end up in India, and they're meditating, and they feel like their soul's coming back to them. Nobody says that it's not going to work for you. But you're just using part of what you could be doing in this world. You're not utilizing the whole Torah, you're not getting all the mitzvot. We don't discredit that there are good things that happen in other places. The Kuzari actually goes so far as to say that for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when he sees someone praying, let's say he sees someone praying to an idol, God forbid, and they're praying because their child is sick. No, we should never have such a thing. Hashem sometimes chooses to answer them. But they're praying to the idol, not to Hashem. Because Hashem has mercy on everybody. Hashem has rachmanut on everybody. And so if Hashem says, listen, this child really needs help, the parent is really distraught, Hashem doesn't care who he's praying to. Hashem will make it work. But just because Hashem has mercy, doesn't mean that now this idol became a god. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden this idol, see, the guy's going to say, I prayed to the idol and it worked. You should know in the world there's all kinds of things that people put in their head that work. I don't know if I should bring up certain things, but there are all kinds of emunot tefillot, all kinds of false beliefs. If you do certain things, if you see a black cat, it'll bring you bad luck. I'm sure there was a guy who once saw a black cat and had a bad day. It has nothing to do with a black cat, though.
Poor cat.
Nothing to do with a black cat. In fact, I once told somebody that if I were to have a pet cat, I would only have a black cat. Why?
Why?
To show everybody else there's nothing wrong with having a black cat. You have to sometimes... Rav Isra Zalman Meltzer, his wife, used to light Shabbat candles with light bulbs. He had special silver candlesticks and 2 light bulbs on top. And when they said, but why don't you light a light with fire? You know, what's the big... Why light bulbs? And he would make her light not on the Shabbat table, but in the window of the front window of the house. And why? To show everybody in his generation that light bulbs are fire, their electricity is fire, and you can't use it on Shabbat. Sometimes you have to make a statement. So if I were to have a cat, I would only have a black cat. Walking under a ladder. Things that people, opening up an umbrella. I'll tell you, after I met Rav Peretz, we don't use umbrellas anymore when Rav Peretz is students. But before I was Rav Peretz's student and we used umbrellas, I would only open my umbrella inside of the building.
Why can't you use an umbrella?
No, you can't. Rav Peretz has a rule that people, here you don't have it. Nobody walks on the street over here. But let's say in New York or in Jerusalem, people are walking on the street, everyone's holding an umbrella, so it's kind of like these umbrella wars. You know, like, you have 20 people that fit on the sidewalk and everyone's pushing with their umbrellas, and what's the point of an umbrella? What's going to happen if you get wet? Put on a raincoat and a hat. What's going to happen? Your coat will go in your... When you have an umbrella, it's you don't know really how umbrellas look over here, but they have these umbrellas you can fit the whole family inside of them. They're called Ein Od Milvadi, you know? There's nobody else in the world except for me. And those umbrellas, it's a gava. So Rav Peretz says you should get wet and shouldn't have ego. So we don't use umbrellas. But certain things you have to do to show people there's nothing wrong with it. Recently I saw people, all kinds of rocks they have. Necklaces are supposed to take care of pain, and this rock, and it's supposed to do this. Heaven Havalim. Heaven Havalim, Amar Kohelet. It's all emptiness and nothingness. You have pains? Take medication. Don't have pains. We have to focus on things that are real in the world. Sometimes it worked for somebody. It doesn't mean that that's what made it work. So are we being uber rationalist? We're not being rationalist. We just have to sometimes stick to a way that's not so crazy. And then says the rabbi the following: this is how the world looked before Moshe. I'm going to say this as many times as I need to say it for Jews to get it. We don't talk enough about Moshe Rabbeinu. We don't talk enough about Moshe in our religion. The Christians all day long, they talk Yeshu this and Yeshu that, and Yeshu this and Yeshu that. And the Muslims all the time, Muhammad this and Muhammad that, and Muhammad this and Muhammad. And the Buddhists are always a Buddhist, and they always talk Buddha and Buddha and Buddha. And the Jews, we have Moshe Rabbeinu. He's not our God. We know he's praying to him. But if Muhammad was a prophet, I don't know what he was. Barely a person he was. But Moshe Rabbeinu was the king of all the kings of all the prophets, Adon HaNevi'im. He was the master of all the prophets. Yeshayahu and Yecheskel and Yirmiyahu and Amos and Hosea. They would look at Moshe Rabbeinu and get scared. Avraham Avinu would look at Moshe Rabbeinu and wouldn't know what to do. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai would look at Moshe Rabbeinu, whoa. It doesn't take away from their greatness. You want to talk later rabbis? All the tzaddikim, the Baba Sali and the Lubavitcher Rebbe and Rabbi Moshe Feinstein and every one of them together, if they were to see Moshe Rabbeinu, they would bow, kiss his feet. Moshe Rabbeinu is the father of everything that we have in Judaism. And we don't talk enough about him. Every day after Shachrit, we say, Moshe Rabbeinu is Adon Kol Nevi'im. He's the master of all the prophets in the world. We don't give enough credit to Moshe. Before Moshe Rabbeinu came to the world, and Hashem said, whoa, this is a person that I want to give a Torah to. Before that, this world looked like tohu vavohu. It looked like emptiness and nothingness. It looked like craziness, this world. Everybody did whatever they wanted. Hashem had never yet communicated with the world at large. Only with certain individuals. Zulati me'at mizar, except for a few individuals, niftim b'nimusei kochavim v'atva'im v'netakim minimus lenimus u'me'eloha le'eloham. With the exception of a few individuals, people were seduced by belief in the power of the stars and other natural forces. They wandered from religion to religion, from God to God. Some even believed in a few gods just to be safe. I once saw a guy, what? Yeah, I once saw a guy with a cross, a Magen David, a crescent star, and Buddha hanging off of him.
It's like the coexist sign.
So I looked at him and I thought he was from this coexist group, you know? Someone sent me a great picture. You know the coexist? It has like all the religions in it that spells coexist. So a Jewish guy once sent me a picture that says you cannot coexist with people who want you to cease existing. You know, it's a nice belief, but you first have to make sure they don't want to kill you first. They say one of the prime ministers, I don't know if they What they say, one of the prime ministers said, that if Hamas were to put down their arms, there would still be a Palestinian state. But if Israel were to put down their arms, there would be no more Israel. And you have to know, you can't coexist with everybody in the world. You may want to, but it's not going to happen until certain things happen first. So this guy, I saw him, I said, what religion are you? He said, I'm all the religions. By the way, by default, if you're Christian, you're not Muslim. The Christians and the Muslims are a mutually exclusive religion. If you're Jewish, you're definitely neither of the two. If you're, I don't know, Buddhist, I don't know what they can get away with all kinds of things. Baha'i, I'm sure he had a necklace. I said, so what's your deal? He said, listen, whenever I die, one of these gods is going to help me out. So I want to say that I made him happy. There were some people like that. They believed in a few gods because they didn't know which one was going to help them out.
Touching all the bases.
Right. ושוכחים מנהיגם ומנהלם ומשימם סיבה לתועלות. Eventually they forgot the one who conducts and manages these forces and who placed them in the universe to benefit mankind. והם בעצמם סיבה לנזקים כפי ההכנה והזימון. Instead, these forces are a source of harm to man because of man's inadequate preparation to receive influence and his improper use of them. אבל המועיל בעצמו הוא עניין אלוהי והמזיק בעצמו הוא היעדרו. Ultimately then, the only true beneficial tool is the divine Torah, and the lack thereof causes harm. I was once asked a hard question. Is Reform Judaism better than no Judaism? Someone asked me this question. At least outside of Israel, there are kids who are going to Reform school where they remind them they're Jewish. They teach them about Kiddush on Friday night. They give them Chanukiot to light with light bulbs. Maybe that's better than a kid who doesn't know anything.
I don't know, because then if you ever want to try and teach the more traditional Orthodox way, then they say, well, I already know this stuff. And if somebody doesn't know anything, say, oh, okay, I don't know anything.
It takes a lot of deep programming before you can program, as opposed to someone who could just program. What are your thoughts, Tom? There's no right answer to this question.
So you think is Christian moral better than no moral in society at all?
No, I think it's a different question to me.
Remember when I told you the Kuzari and the Rambam are two very different books? We spoke about this like 2 years ago in the Kuzari class.
Yeah.
We spoke about the fact that the Rambam's book, The Guide to the Perplexed, he was leaving the Jewish community and speaking to everybody who needed to hear him. It was like the Rambam was the first outreach rabbi. The Kuzari is saying, I don't need you. I don't need you. I don't need to make you happy. I don't have to speak politically correctly. You want to follow Judaism, so come to our terms. I don't have to bring things down to you. The Kuzari is not an apologetic book. It's probably the reason why it's not so studied in academic circles. It doesn't have that liberal, open-minded, philosophical bend to it. The Kuzari is saying it's better that they should have no religions. Tissue box is back. Better they should have no religions than they should have the wrong religion. Because the Torah is what makes a person straight, what makes them good. And the lack of a Torah is what corrupts a person. That's Rabbi Yonatan Halevy's belief. That's his approach. It's a hard line. It's a straight line approach. But then this might explain certain things. I was talking to my wife about different rabbis. Some are more politically correct, some are less politically correct. It seems like in America, the model of rabbi is a rabbi should just smile and be happy and never share an opinion and not argue with anybody, and he should love everybody in the whole world, and he should and shalom and Islam. That makes a good rabbi. In Israeli communities, especially in Sephardic communities, but not necessarily, the approach is rabbis are pretty provocative. You look at statements that Rabbi Ovadia Yosef made in his life, Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu made in his life, the Baba Sali made in his life, Rabbi Mordechai Sharabi made in his life, the Ben Ish Chai made in his life, Rabbi Uziel made in his life, Rabbi Yitzchak Nisim made in his life, Rabbi Bakshi Doron made in his life. You see the statements, and they're actually very sharp, pointed swords that are thrown all over the place. The reason is, you sometimes have to just share the way that you believe is true. And the question is, well, why can't you love all the Jews? And why can't you just say, hey, different strokes for different folks, everyone's got their own, they say whatever floats your boat. Some Jews need this approach, some Jews need that approach. That belief is born out of a very Western ideology. that all approaches are really good and that there's all beautiful. If you really believe that your approach is true, you would be fighting for your approach everywhere. You would be convinced that this is something that needs to continue, something that needs to persevere, something that needs to take over the world. So what about political correctness? You don't have to hate anybody. You can disagree with people's beliefs and still like people. Okay, last night we were at Costco, and my son found this little kid behind him in a stroller. We were online, and he could not stop waving and pointing and screaming. He just wanted to go play with that kid. And I look at the kid and say, "What's his name?" And the mother responded. And need to say, they're our cousins. Not my cousins down the street. Like,
Yeah.
You know, our cousins. Ishmael is a cousin of us, right? That's how it works. We had some family politics back in the day, and then we still haven't worked out our issues since then. So the mother was talking with me, and my baby was laughing and giggling at the other baby, and this father would not look at me, would not say a word, would not smile, was boiling. I don't know, maybe they went home and he beat her up. I don't know what happened over there. But I'll tell you the truth. The truth is that at the end of the day, in a humanity level of humans, we're humans. And we respect everybody. And we appreciate everybody. And everybody's important. It doesn't make a difference what religion they're from, what group they're from, what color their skin is. When I hear racism in the world, I cannot believe that in the 21st century people are still racist. But when I hear racism in the Jewish community, I can't believe that 2,000 years ago racism didn't go away. We should have been the first people on the ball to get rid of this racism. What can I do? These things bother me to no end. Because there's a certain refinement that Torah brings to you that humanity is first. Our parents once told me, we at the first step, we're all humans. And the second step, we have Judaism. And it doesn't mean that we're compromising on our Judaism, but every person deserves a certain smile from us, a certain hello from us, a certain respect from us. Doesn't mean we're going to go for dinner. Doesn't mean we're going to marry kids. Doesn't mean we're going to go to school together. Just means the basic humanity. That's what's politically correct about having your own belief. You can fight for everything and believe that their belief is wrong and someone else's Judaism is corrupt, and you're allowed to say it. But you cannot hate the person. And when it comes time for me to see a reform rabbi, I'll shake his hand. Hello, how are you? Shabbat shalom. Keep moving. He's not a rasha, so I can't look at him in the face. Maybe he is a rasha. But at the end of the day, a human is a human. And I'm going to fight Reform Judaism tooth and nail. But it doesn't make me hate people who belong to the Reform community. We have to make sure not to blur the lines here. But we have to firmly believe the Torah is the only answer to the world. If you don't believe it, then you're not going to pass it on to your kids. If you don't believe it, the people around you won't believe it. If you're not convinced the Torah is it, then there's nothing to do about it. You can't convince someone of something that you're not convinced in the first place. So what do you think? Is any moral better than no morals? Or is it an all or nothing game? Let's ask Moshe Chaim. Don't listen to me, Chevra. This is a class over here. We're not.
I think some morals help a little bit. They may be wrong in some aspects, but they do make them a little bit better of a human being.
What does the moral say? If your wife looks out the window, you beat her up. I mean that's not a good moral. I don't know.
For example, in America, like 100 years ago, there was much higher moral level in society because of Christianity.
Some would argue. Some would make that argument.
Everything.
Some would argue that
The relationship.
right on certain levels. Some would argue, though, that 100 years later, America has become very liberal and open-minded. But part of that open-mindedness has allowed for freedom for a lot of other people that should have had freedom 100 years ago and didn't. The Jewish community is much better off today than we were 100 years ago in this country. Specifically because 100 years ago this country was a Christian country. And today it's not. Or at least not officially. Tzniut definitely went down the pipes today 100 years later. Family values are definitely down the drains 100 years later. Absolutely. There's no question about it.
But all of this affects the Jewish community also.
Sure.
Parents
I would
wouldn't
like-
fight about Sneut 100 years ago because everybody dressed.
I would like to believe that 100 years ago, Jews weren't 200 years ago. Jews weren't influenced in having black slaves in this country, but it's not true. Jews were part of it just like everyone else was. I would like to believe. So those values changed for the better. This country became a more open-minded country. It went down the drains and other things, but I'm not sure that some didn't come on account of the other ones. You're thinking something.
Yeah, I was looking at some old family photos from 100, 150 years ago, around 1850, 1880 in that area. And the women
By the
all
way,
dressed
who
like
here has
Orthodox
family
Jews.
pictures
They were
from?
Christian women. Their
from
dresses up to
1850?
here, their long sleeves, their arms up to their head, their skirts were down to the knee, down to the ankle.
Hey, that's what Moshe Chaim was saying. And you don't even have to go to the 1850s. I mean,
Not even the 1880s, 1890s.
What?
Even now, the Mennonites, Amishers.
it's true. Sometimes I see people in the store. I think they're Jewish, and then they say, "Oh." It's like sometimes people look at my wife, think she's Muslim, and they see me and they run away. Well, we have somebody now. We just had a lady come say, "Oh, she was so happy to my wife that she saw me, and she ran,
She ran
ran."
away.
I never saw one run like that. It was,
One time I was walking and someone said salam.
So things have changed in just the last 100 years.
right, but I'm convinced
For the
that
worse.
some things for the worse, some things for the better.
But truthfully, when somebody's passionate about something, much easier to take that passion and channel it properly versus somebody who's indifferent and to get the flame started. And I think people who have religion have a certain passion burning in them, and it can be terrible. But when you flip it and you channel it right, you find those are the people who are usually the most involved versus somebody who just is disinterested, who
Yeah.
just don't have.
Let me ask you a certain question. Forgive me for this
But-
comparison, because my wife brought up a good point about passion. In this country, there's a big term called Judeo-Christian values. Now, I personally don't like this term because I don't think that we share.
Politicians use it a lot.
What?
Politicians
Use it a lot.
Yeah.
By the way, I'll tell you, there were times where they were discussing the Judeo-Islamic, and all of a sudden Judeo-Christian. In the Inquisition, nobody was talking about Judeo-Christian values. I promise you. It's a new trick that they pulled out of the hat. But let's assume it's really true that at least on face value, the Jewish communities and the Christian communities share a lot of values: belief in God, the certain rules for the Torah that we believe in, so on and so forth. Even though I agree with this, there are values that Jews and Christians share, and technically, someone would tell me, "Listen, focus on what we have in common, not what we have separate." That's the spirit of the world today, right? But yet in the Jewish community, we still talk a lot about how different we are from the Christians. And we're very proud about this difference, and we're proud that we don't have inquisitions and crusades in our back pocket, and we're happy we don't have those things haunting our history, and pogroms and missionary activities that are going on today. And if it's okay for me to talk about such a group and say, listen, we don't like them, we don't appreciate them, we're not... What about in the Jewish community? Why isn't there groups that we also share a lot of values with? But at a certain point in time, I push come to shove, I really feel that their beliefs and their values are, some of them are similar, but very many of them are completely off the walls with Judaism. Why can't I criticize them? If I were to criticize them, I'd get under fire from the Jewish community. Why the double standard?
Well, to be fair, the difference between the Jew and the Christian is qualitatively different than the Jew and the Jew.
Why? I don't agree with you.
Okay.
Yeah, we're talking about two issues within the world and within the Jewish community: the moral level and open-mindedness. Right? And you're talking about open-mindedness, and I'm talking about moral level. And it's same thing in both societies. In Jewish community, also, I'm thinking same way. You're worried about open-mindedness. I don't. I'm worried about moral level. If the moral level, the level of observance in Jewish community is high, I don't care if certain Hasidic group accept me or not accept me. As far as he's a observant Jew and he is doing his Geulah joke very well, I'm completely satisfied.
It's observance.
And this is my open-mindedness.
Right. I see. Some would argue you're so open-minded your brains fell out, you know? But let's ask this question. Does observance, by default, make you morally, what's the term you use? Morally, you just gave me a word. Morally high?
It depends what mitzvot you're concentrated on. Because
No, there are a lot of
observing
people I know that are
Shabbat, observing
observant in basic Torah values, but I consider them some of the most corrupt people that
I meant when I wanted to say Derech Kadma LeTorah.
I know. So they're not necessarily tied into each other. Hopefully, someone who's more observant will have a higher level of morality. I don't know that. I believe that part of not having an open mind is having a lower moral value. Okay, that's what we're going to argue.
Yeah, but
Can you bring example?
right, but factually, that's not. Factually, he's right. In almost every society that you found open-mindedness, you found a bent only to open-mindedness towards the left, and it was always at a compromise of moral values. Meaning it's, let's be open-minded, but let's be open-minded only to the left, and let's be open-minded to, for example, today, I'll give you an example, right, with all the different marriage rights. You don't find anybody, you do find, but you don't find any open-minded individuals lobbying for regular standard rights that existed 200 years ago versus...
Because you don't need to.
Okay, but my point is, when they're lobbying, it's always going to be to the left, and it's always going to be to transform things, not necessarily
Let's argue your point. Rav Kook argued to accept the secular Zionist Israelis. And today we look back at Rav Kook and realize that he was correct. And those who fought against him for being too open-minded were wrong. But yeah, he was rallying for the left. Does it make his cause invalid? The Baal Shem Tov went on a rally for Jews who were uneducated. Instead of Jews who were... He went to the left. People who were not necessarily really religious or observant.
But he was pulling them towards him, not the other way around.
Rav Kook would argue the same thing.
Right. We're not talking about pious leaders who...
Rabbi Uziel would argue the same thing. That he was... Some would say he was compromising on Jewish values. You have to understand, before the 1900s, no Jew ever considered in his mind that somebody who was going to be Jewish and not observant was still going to be liked in the Jewish community. So do we move morally in the right direction or immorally in the wrong direction? There are Jews in New York and Jerusalem who would tell me that we moved in the wrong direction. And that's why our kids are not religious, and that's why our families are not religious. But who's right?
It's a very complex
Okay,
situation.
like any
I don't
issue.
think you could attribute to one idea only.
You can't attribute anything in the world to one
Right.
idea, and everything in the world is complex.
Okay. Well,
I mean, just because people were down in history, the leaders who made a difference were those who were open-minded. Those who were just as narrow-minded as the other ones didn't leave a mark in history.
You're defining open-minded differently. Open-minded doesn't mean that they accepted humanity. That yes, but open-minded we're talking about when it comes to values. If you took the Baal Shem Tov, when it came to religion, he was not open-minded. To the contrary, he took it to a very different... The group is called Hasidim for a reason. As human beings, for sure, he accepted everyone on a human level. 100% he was open-minded. On a moral
the
level,
majority of the adherents to this movement were ignoramuses.
okay.
So then it means that he compromised on a religious level.
No, meaning the division is fine. You gotta say on a human level, 100% open-minded. On a religious level, not at all compromising.
It's not open-minded.
yeah.
It's true that he focused on something else, but that's because of the
So let's talk about his Hasidim from New York. You don't care as long as they're religious if they accept you or not. The part of their
No,
religiosity...
the Hasidim, excuse me. The
No, that's
Hasidim-
what I'm just quoting what he said.
I know, but the Hasidim today is not a good example.
No,
it's not
They're not what the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh had in mind.
I'm not talking about Hasidim. I'm not now talking about the Baal Shem Tov.
Okay.
He's off my table.
Oh, now we're talking back about
Now we're talking about
Moshe
Moshe
Chaim.
Chaim's story.
Okay.
See how Baal Shem Tov has... So, She thinks I'm a misnagid.
That's-
So
No, you're a Baal Tshuva, that's all. You're on the road.
so many things I could say right now.
I know, just answer Moshe Chaim.
So
Be nice.
Moshe,
Without blasphemy.
Maybe you better edit this part out too.
there's a reason. There's a reason every morning she says Shasani Kiltono and I say Shala Asani.
Yeah, right.
So we are about your guy in New York. He's religious. He keeps kosher. He keeps Shabbat. But he doesn't accept another Jew for being Jewish. Is he really on a higher moral level? Where did his religion take him?
No, you take one quality and trying to make a point. But I'm talking in general, the society of the most closed Hasidic group is at much higher moral level than any other community.
You would like to believe that. Because you haven't been there.
As far as I know.
Last night I was on a website there was a lady who was giving a speech, and it was on this website of a Jewish Community Watch. And I don't know this organization, I'm not condoning it on record, but they were Jewish sexual offenders. And you should see how many of those guys were with black hats and beards and long coats and rabbis and institutions and in a very closed community. Now obviously if I would put them into the number of people in the United States who are sexual offenders, it would be not even a number. Here you have 20 and here you have 20,000.
Even towards the number of observant people in general, we have at least a couple millions probably.
All the
So
illnesses of
there's supposed to be
society
several
exist in our
sexual
societies too, even in the especially in the most closed. If I would tell you that in the most closed Jewish circles, there you'll find the most racism. There you'll find the most bigotry. There you're going to find the most inequality. There you're going to find all kinds of crazy things.
Because they are on a certain level of holiness, and Yatzer Hara is also high.
Okay, because you should be with the Baal Shem Tov. Moshe Chaim's the Chassid.
No, I think it would be nice if it would make sense that the world should be like that. Practically, it's not true. And the question then becomes, why? Meaning, you're right. It should be that in a closed society where people are more, quote, observant, morally they should be higher. So then the question is, there's a big question mark, then why isn't it that way?
It isn't?
Now I'm going to make an argument for Moshe Chaim. Today in the news there was a story about a little kid came to a store and he wanted ice cream, and he was missing $2 from the change that he gave, and the guy behind the counter took out his credit card and filled in the $2 for him, and it was all over the news. Oh, this guy is a good Samaritan, he's a good heart, he took care of the kid gave him a note, Baruch Hashem. Last night in our family WhatsApp group, in my wife's family's WhatsApp group, there was a lady, one of the neighbors of one of the people in our family or something like that.
Yeah.
She was supposed to make Sheva Brachot for one of the people in their family. Now Sheva Brachot, by the way, by them looks like a wedding. It's not like, some fish and rice and go home. It's a real production, like waiters and rented tables and special lights and desserts that are made by chefs that come from Hashem Yishmor, from what goes on over there. Now, but really, every one of those events, easily $15,000, $20,000 a night. So she made this event, and then it turns out that as she's calling people, she made the event on the wrong night of Sheva Brachot.
Oh no.
Yep.
And everything is set up to go, and they have nothing to do with it. And so she put out on WhatsApp, they should send it to all the groups, that if there's any couple in New York that needs a Sheva Brachot, they should come do Sheva Brachot by them, they're going to give everything to them. That is much more than $2 at an ice cream store, but it wasn't even in the news. Why wasn't it in the news? Because it's not even surprising in our community that we would do such a thing. Because you can make an argument for Moshe Chaim that because the higher religious values, the more you are on a moral level. Yeah, when did I hear this story ever happen in the culture around me? Never.
No.
Never.
If you adhere to Torah values, if you really sincerely adhere to Torah values, then you are on a higher moral level. But some people who just go through the motions aren't necessarily on that level. But some are.
That's where we're arguing.
Right.
See, Moshe Chaim is right. If there are people who chose to be observant and chose to be religious and were living a religious lifestyle because of what they believed in, that community would be also the highest moral place in the world. But because we exist in the communities, Marlene pointed out exactly where we're arguing. Because the communities we have, not everyone chooses to be there. Some people are just born there. It's an interesting thing to be born into an Orthodox. What does that mean? That you're born and you're not religious because you believe in the Torah, because you want to learn, because you connect to Hashem, because you like to pray, but because that's what you do. I met a guy who doesn't keep kosher, doesn't keep Shabbat. He used to be in a Hasidic community. He goes to minyan 3 times a day. Why? Because it's in his head. It's part of being a human being is you have to be in the synagogue 3 times a day. And it's an interesting thing. So when you have a community like that, so those are all the people that are going to be on a much morally low level. So
But
in the
even
perfect
with,
world...
even with the low, it's still higher. I come
I
from a
don't-
place
I don't
where
agree with you.
in
Higher than average.
in, twen-
I don't
in
agree with
25 years that I've lived in Borough Park, there's not been one murder by a Jewish person. Well, with an exception. One. 25 years, one. Versus, of course, are there a lot of people sitting in jail for white-collar crimes? Yes, there are. But there are certain things that are so ingrained, even in people who are, you want to say, the lowest and the fringe of society, they're not doing anything because
So
of
because
God.
we do crimes differently, now it's okay?
No, but what I'm telling you is that when there's enough of a center that's really holy and pious, even those who are outside get affected.
In my last
They do.
10 visits to an Orthodox community, I have not found nice people like I find on the streets in San
Because you were
Diego.
wearing the wrong sunglasses. It was a choice you made.
You're not open-minded enough.
Right? Exactly.
Have you been to Bar Park before? Have you been to Meah Sha'arim before? Great holy people, but not nice people. And it's not their fault. All of New York is like that.
Two places that are harsh.
Harsh, but it's true. And it's not just Meah Sha'arim, it's Israel in general. They're not going to be like the people. What I'm trying to make an argument is that there are certain things that are not necessarily connected with our being religious.
Okay, so we're saying it should be, though.
Should be, I agree with that. That's what the Rabbi Yonatan Halevy is saying also.
Right.
Should be. It has to be. But I'm going to finish off with one last thing. Harav Peretz, we were discussing once about values from the non-Jewish world, the Jewish world. We're talking about the halakha that some people believe. We don't believe this is a halakha. But if somebody is non-observant and they touch a bottle of wine, then it becomes yain nesach. It becomes wine
If
you
they
can't
can
drink.
look at it.
That's already...
Yes, sure.
You see, that's the problem.
Yeah.
That's what
that's a
happened with the
problem.
Dam and Hava.
What'd you say?
So,
Just added another fence.
So, yeah, that's the whole story. It's in my book. Now I'm trying to figure where was I?
Harav Peretz.
Oh, Harav Peretz. So, Harav Peretz told us in the class that actually he disagrees. There are some people that you call chilonim, that's what you call them, that if they, secular Jews, technically, that if they were to touch his bottle of wine, he would make kiddush on it. But there are some Haredi, that's the word he used, ultra-Orthodox Jews, that if they would touch his bottle of wine, he would put it in the garbage. And so we laughed. It's a funny thing to say. We laughed. Right? But the truth is that when we laughed, I said, what do you think, I'm joking? Yeah, so that's crazy. There's some religious people whose wine you wouldn't drink because it makes the wine idolatrous, and some secular people who, if they touch the wine, it's good for kiddush. They said, let me tell you. It has nothing to do with your secular, if you're religious, but your relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's some secular people he knows. They call themselves secular, but they come to kiddush every Friday night. They go to synagogue on Shabbat morning. They go to the kotel every day for slichot. Those people...
Those not
Yeah, sure. They break Shabbat. They eat non-kosher. They might not even be married to somebody Jewish. They're not observant. Those people don't believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And therefore, for me, they're better than the guy who keeps kosher or keeps Shabbat, than a person like that who is a bad person and a moral, doesn't even believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Just there because that's what Jews do. Because that person, he wouldn't drink their wine.
You have to be a pretty good judge of character and a person fairly well built to
Sure.
use that as a standard.
Sure. Something to think about. This is food for thought. This has been a debate forever. Moral, subjective morality versus objective morality.
How can you say that if somebody looks at a bottle of wine, touches a bottle of wine,
And they're Jewish? Hashem Yishmor.
Yeah.
It's a person who their halakha is flawed, it's rotten in its roots. Rotten in its roots. Not even normal. It's rotten there. It can't be. A Jew's going to come to Shabbat table by Kiddush and he's going to touch wine, look at wine, and they're going to say it's not kosher. It's not the what can I do? Alright, so B'ezrat Hashem, we should have a Chag Kasher V'Sameach when it comes, the first Shabbat Shalom when it comes, God willing. And we will continue with the Kuzari. The next point of the Kuzari is he wants to get back to the subject. Which subject? He wants to go back like 40 pages. I don't know, 30 pages, however many pages. Whereas, how did Judaism become accepted? Where did he end off? He got into all these conversations, nature, this, that, languages. Remember all these conversations? It all happened just because he met the rabbi and he liked them. But at the end of the day, he still didn't talk to the rabbi enough about his religion. So what do you really believe in? But push comes to shove to end off this class. Moshe Rabbeinu is Adon Kol. He's the father of all the prophets. So we have to give credit. When you hear the Torah, and Moshe says something, cling onto those words. There's a reason why it's always Vayomer Hashem and Moshe. Hashem is always speaking to Moshe. Moshe is our prophet. Moshe is our leader. Moshe is who we all hope to be. Moshe Rabbeinu is the only one who we call our rabbi, our teacher, universally. All the Jewish denominations all consider Moshe Rabbeinu our rabbi. And any Jewish denomination who doesn't consider Moshe Rabbeinu our rabbi is publicly announcing that they are not a denomination of Judaism. Because what makes us Jews is our belief in Moshe Rabbeinu. And that's when we became rabbinic Jews. Not in the giving of the Mishnah, not by the Talmud, by the giving of the Torah, we became rabbinic Jews when we accepted Moshe Rabbeinu as our leader because Hashem chose him to be the leader of the Jewish people and of the whole entire world.